10 Things Netflix is Hiding About Pablo Escobar. Pablo Escobar, the infamous Colombian drug lord, has been the subject of numerous series, documentaries, and movies. One of the most popular portrayals of his life is Netflix's series Narcos. While the series has been praised for its dramatization of Escobar's life and the Medellin cartel, there are several aspects of his story that are not fully addressed or are entirely omitted. Here are 10 things Netflix is hiding about Pablo Escobar. The complexity of his childhood. The series Narcos briefly touches on Escobar's childhood, but does not delve deeply into how his early years shaped his personality and ambitions. Escobar grew up in a lower middle-class family in Rio Negro, Colombia. His father was a farmer and his mother was a schoolteacher. From a young age, Escobar showed an inclination towards crime, starting with petty thefts and cigarette smuggling. The lack of economic opportunities and the influence of local criminal figures played a crucial role in his development as a future drug lord. His role in Colombian politics. Netflix briefly mentions Escobar's foray into politics, but does not explore its full impact. In the 1980s, Escobar was elected as an alternate member of the Colombian House of Representatives. He used his position to gain legitimacy and protect his criminal interests. His influence in Colombian politics was significant, as he bribed numerous officials and funded political campaigns. His political ambitions also led him to clash with powerful figures, which eventually contributed to his downfall. The extent of his wealth. Although Narcos portrays Escobar's opulence, it does not fully capture the extent of his wealth. At his peak, Escobar was one of the richest men in the world, with an estimated fortune of over $30 billion. His cartel controlled 80% of the global cocaine market, generating daily revenues of up to $70 million. Escobar owned numerous luxurious properties, including the famous Hacienda Nápoles, which featured a private zoo, airstrips, and a bull ring. His global distribution network. The series focuses primarily on Escobar's operations in Colombia and the United States, but his distribution network was much broader. The Medellin cartel had connections in Europe, Asia, and Africa, enabling it to distribute cocaine worldwide. Escobar established smuggling routes through Mexico, the Caribbean, and Central America, using planes, boats, and submarines. His ability to adapt and expand his distribution network was one of the keys to his success. The brutality of his regime. Narcos depicts Escobar's violence but does not always convey the full brutality of his regime. Escobar was responsible for the deaths of thousands of people, including police officers, politicians, journalists, and innocent civilians. He used terror as a tool to maintain control and eliminate his enemies. His motto, plata o plomo, silver or lead, reflected his ruthless approach. Bribe or kill anyone who stood in his way. The violence of the Medellin cartel left an indelible mark on Colombian society. His relationship with other cartels. The series highlights the rivalry between the Medellin and Cali cartels, but does not delve into the complex relationships between Escobar and other criminal groups. Escobar formed strategic alliances with various cartels and criminal organizations in Latin America. These alliances allowed him to expand his distribution network and increase his influence. However, he also had numerous conflicts with other drug traffickers, resulting in violent wars and betrayals. The impact of his fall on Colombia. Pablo Escobar's death on December 2, 1993, marked the end of an era in Colombian drug trafficking, but did not signify the end of the country's problems with drug-related issues. Escobar's downfall had a profound and multifaceted impact on Colombia, with consequences that have extended over decades. Fragmentation of the Medellin cartel. After Escobar's death, the Medellin cartel, which had been one of the most powerful criminal organizations in the world, quickly fragmented. Without its charismatic and feared leader, the cartel lost cohesion, and many of its members were captured or killed. However, this fragmentation did not signal the end of drug trafficking in Colombia. Instead, new criminal groups emerged to fill the power vacuum left by the Medellin cartel. Rise of other criminal groups. With the fall of the Medellin cartel, Other criminal groups, such as the Cali Cartel and the Norte del Valle Cartel, seized the opportunity to expand their operations. The Cali Cartel, in particular, became the world's leading supplier of cocaine during the 1990s. These groups adopted more discreet and sophisticated tactics than those used by Escobar, avoiding the extreme violence and media attention that had characterized the Medellin cartel. In addition to traditional cartels, new criminal organizations known as criminal bands, or BACRIM, emerged. These bands, composed of former paramilitaries and ex-guerrilla members, engaged in drug trafficking, extortion, and other crimes. The proliferation of these groups contributed to the persistence of violence and insecurity in many regions of Colombia. Continuation of violence and drug trafficking. Despite Escobar's fall, violence and drug trafficking remained severe problems in Colombia. New criminal groups and cartels maintained the flow of cocaine to international markets, and competition for control over trafficking routes and coca-growing territories resulted in violent confrontations. Drug-related violence continued to claim thousands of lives and displace entire communities. Militarization of society. The war on drugs in Colombia led to significant militarization of society. The Colombian government, with support from the United States, launched a series of military operations to combat cartels and criminal groups. These operations, which included aerial fumigation of coca crops and manual eradication, often resulted in human rights violations and negatively affected rural communities. Plan Colombia. Plan Colombia, a cooperative initiative between the United States and Colombia, launched in 2000, was one of the most notable efforts in the fight against drug trafficking. Although it achieved some success in reducing coca crops and capturing criminal leaders, it was also criticized for its military focus and its negative impacts on the civilian population. Human rights violations. The militarization of the fight against drug trafficking and the presence of illegal armed groups led to numerous human rights violations in Colombia. Security forces and paramilitary groups were responsible for extrajudicial executions, forced disappearances, and mass displacements. Indigenous, Afro-Colombian, and peasant communities were particularly affected by violence and repression. Additionally, corruption and impunity were persistent problems. Many officials and members of the security forces were accused of collaborating with cartels and criminal groups, undermining trust in state institutions, and complicating the implementation of effective anti-drug policies. Current challenges in the fight against drug trafficking. The fight against drug trafficking remains a significant challenge for Colombia today. Despite efforts by the government and the international community, the country continues to be one of the world's leading cocaine producers. Coca cultivation has increased in recent years, and criminal groups continue to adapt and find new ways to evade detection and control. The implementation of the 2016 peace agreement with the FARC offered an opportunity to address some of the underlying issues of drug trafficking, such as rural underdevelopment and poverty. However, the agreement's implementation has been slow and faces numerous obstacles. Violence and insecurity remain severe problems in many regions, and new armed groups have emerged to fill the void left by the FARC. Social and economic impact. The fall of Escobar and the persistence of drug trafficking in Colombia have also been felt on a social and economic level. Violence and insecurity have hindered economic development and investment in many regions. Rural communities in particular have suffered the consequences of crop eradication and the lack of viable economic alternatives. Moreover, drug trafficking has contributed to corruption and institutional weakness, complicating governance and the rule of law. The perception of impunity and lack of trust in state institutions have been significant barriers to progress and stability in the country. Conclusion: the fall of Pablo Escobar was a significant milestone in the history of drug trafficking in Colombia, but it did not mark the end of the problems associated with drug trafficking and violence. The fragmentation of the Medellin cartel and the emergence of new criminal groups maintained violence and drug trafficking as persistent issues in the country. The militarization of the war on drugs and human rights violations have left a lasting legacy of suffering and distrust in institutions. Despite the challenges, Colombia has made some progress in the fight against drug trafficking and in building peace. The implementation of the peace agreement with the FARC and efforts to promote rural development and social justice are important steps toward a safer and more prosperous future. However, the fight against drug trafficking remains a complex, long-term task that requires an integrated and sustained approach. 8. His cultural legacy. Pablo Escobar left a complex cultural legacy in Colombia and worldwide. In some communities, he is seen as a modern-day Robin Hood who helped the poor and built infrastructure. In others, he is remembered as a ruthless criminal who caused suffering and destruction. The series Narcos has contributed to the mythologization of Escobar, portraying him as a charismatic and fascinating figure. However, this portrayal often simplifies the reality of his impact and the complexities of his personality. 9. The life of his family after his death. Narcos briefly mentions Escobar's family but does not delve into what happened to them after his death. His wife, Maria Victoria Henao, and his children, Juan Pablo and Manuela, fled Colombia and lived in several countries under false identities. Eventually, they settled in Argentina, where they tried to lead a normal life. However, Escobar's shadow followed them, and they faced numerous legal and social challenges. Juan Pablo, who changed his name to Sebastián Marroquín, has written books and given lectures about his father's life, attempting to offer a more human and critical perspective. The DEA's undercover operations. The series portrays the DEA's involvement in the hunt for Escobar, but does not reveal all the details of its undercover operations. The DEA carried out numerous secret missions and collaborated with Colombian security forces to track and capture Escobar. These operations often involved controversial and risky tactics. Additionally, the DEA had to navigate a complex political and social environment, facing corruption and violence in Colombia. The collaboration between the DEA and Colombian authorities was crucial to Escobar's eventual downfall, but also generated tensions and controversies. The Netflix series Narcos has captured the imagination of millions of viewers worldwide, offering an exciting dramatization of Pablo Escobar's life. However, like any work of fiction, it omits and simplifies certain aspects of his story. By exploring these 10 things that Netflix is hiding about Pablo Escobar, we can gain a more comprehensive and nuanced understanding of one of the most notorious drug lords in history. Escobar's life serves as a reminder of the complexities of drug trafficking and the ongoing challenges in the fight against drugs.